Good morning, everyone. We'll start our panel now for the cybersecurity, protecting your company in a digital economy. Certainly not an area that I'm at all familiar with, but I have experts here. I'm Gil Staley. It's my pleasure to serve as the CEO of the Woodlands Area Economic Development Partnership. And it's worth noting in the economic development arenas how impactful small business is to this community. The average size of our workforce with our many 4,000 plus employers, 12 people. So that indicates the importance of small business in our community as it is across this great state. So let's start with an opportunity for me to introduce our panelists. George Reeves, here to my immediate right, is Supervisory Cybersecurity Advisor with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He works to foster collaboration and coordination on cyber preparedness, risk mitigation and incident response, and to provide cybersecurity resources, including training, exercises, and assessments in support of the nation's critical infrastructure key resource sectors and with state and local government. To his right is Stephen Wright, one of our local businesses in our community. He is the founder and president of Wright Business Technologies, also provider of our organization's IT support, and is responsible for the overall success of the company, clients, employees, and the vendor partners who support his businesses. His team provides IT managed services or outsourcing for small to mid-sized businesses between 10 to 400 employees. He graduated, and I want to see guns up, Texas Tech University.
That's
Yep,
right.
I knew we'd have one there for sure.
Hey.
Both in his business management, but also his MBA. Jeremy Wilson, at the end there, is Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for Security Operations for the State of Texas Department of Information Resources, DIR, and works in the office of the Chief Information Security Office, OCISO. I learned so much on these acronyms. He is responsible for establishing a pilot regional security operations center, or known as RSOC, at Angelo State University, and overseeing the state of Texas's RSOC program once established and expanded. So please join me in welcoming such a distinguished panel of experts on cybersecurity. So let's start with George here, again to the right. What type of cyber resources does CISA, C-I-S-A, provide? And more importantly, to small business, is there a cost?
Sure. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. Never can tell. Yes, so thanks for the question. So been with the agency for about 7 years or so. I actually predate the agency. The agency is only 5 years old. But we've taken a lot of strides these last several years to really kind of ramp up the capabilities, specifically targeting small and medium organizations. So for example, I think during my bio, I kind of read some of the things that we do, but really, this is a national program, but we have really a good footprint across the nation, especially here in Texas. So me, myself, and another here in Houston. We got folks all over the state of Texas. And really our focus is to really be your advocate, to be really your go-to person, not only in times of crisis or when you're having a bad day, but really more importantly, it's before that. So we really kind of focus on left side of boom, is usually the terminology we use, really before the events happen. That's kind of where we sort of kind of invest our time and effort. So planning, prevention, preparedness, really making sure you're equipped, you're at least are aware of the best practices, but also able to take advantage of our resources now. So Gil asked, is there a cost? The only cost associated to working with us is your time. That's really it. These are all federally funded, prepaid, no-cost resources that we offer nationally. So If we're not working with you, we're working with somebody else, okay? That's really what it comes down to. The level of resources come down to training. There's some training. There's providing cybersecurity briefings, awareness, but also even programmatically is helping determine, really taking a cursory look, helping you identify really your overall posture, your approach to cybersecurity. Because you're only going to know what you know. So with our approach, we sort of kind of at least simplify it, practically. These are some areas that we sort of kind of identified that maybe you want to work on. And here are some resources or at least some guidance on how to improve these, okay? Additionally, we have other more proactive type of activities like vulnerability scans, okay? This is really scalable. Doesn't matter if you're a one-person shop or a multi-billion-dollar organization, we can offer vulnerability scanning service to everybody. So this is where we scan your environment looking for vulnerabilities, basically open doors, open windows to get into your infrastructure, and then really providing that awareness so that we can help you address it. Lastly, we could do exercises. We have workshops. There's a whole slew of things that we can do, which I'm actually thrilled because, like I said a few years ago, very limited in what we could offer small and medium businesses.
Very good. Thank you, George. So, Stephen, in the case of a successful breach, and unfortunately some of us do experience that, how do you prioritize the need to get the organization back up and running as quickly as possible, focusing on the forensics of what happened and how, versus that? Do you try to figure out what happened or try to get them up and running as quickly as possible?
Yeah, thank you, Gil. We frequently end up approaching, our initial response obviously is let's get this locked down and take some immediate actions to protect the company. But usually simultaneously, in most cases it's me, I'm talking with the decision makers or the owners of the business, and I talk to them about that very topic. What is most important to you? Because if we focus solely on recovery, a lot of times we're destroying the evidence that's required in order to try and figure out necessarily all the details of what happened. So we have a conversation with them. What's the most important aspect of you? We're never going to intentionally try and destroy the evidence, but we have that conversation. We talk about, what is the likelihood you're going to want to turn in a cybersecurity insurance claim? If you're going to turn in an insurance claim, we have to protect the evidence. Otherwise, your claim's probably going to get shot down, or at least it's in jeopardy. So we have a conversation with them about what's important to them and what the most important steps are, and then we go from there. Obviously, we're always balancing, right? Even if somebody says we need to protect the evidence and the forensics, we're still working to get them up and running as quickly as possible. But there is a subtle shift in focus. There is you have to kind of decide where your priorities are, make the appropriate decision, and take the appropriate actions. So really, it comes down to a decision. And usually hopefully it's the business that can make that decision, and you can give them a little bit of a guidance. But in the end, that's actually a business decision, not a technical decision. And you take it there and you react to it.
Yeah, exactly. And we certainly have been exposed, all of us have, to some threat at one time. And Stephen's organization helped in that. I have been hacked. I clicked on something I should not have. Looked so legitimate to me. Absolutely was convinced it was from my chairman of my board. And after a meeting, I don't even know how they knew that I had a meeting with her, clicked on it, instantly I was hacked and ransomware got in. And thankfully they built it back, but it takes time. So thank you. Jeremy, this is very informative, I know. What new threat actors are you seeing targeting entities in our state?
Great question. Also appreciate your honesty about admitting you clicked on something and talking about ransomware. That's a great lead in. Before I answer the question, though, I just want to thank the governor's office for the opportunity to speak to y'all today, and also thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule to be at this unique event. So show of hands, who's familiar with ransomware?
Yeah.
All right, that's a good thing.
We didn't pay.
We do like to hear that. And there can be extenuating circumstances where people feel like they need to pay, but at
Right.
the state and federal level, we
Right.
typically say we don't like to see people pay because, it funds the bad guys' operations and encourages them to do more of that stuff. But, ransomware is kind of falls under, we have three main threat categories for threat actors. So that would be fraud and organized crime. We have also known as APT, and nation state, that's advanced persistent threat. So this would be like China, Russia trying to break in your systems. And then we have politically motivated hacktivists. So this would be hackers like Anonymous that get spun up about some social cause or something, and then they try and go after, maybe do a denial of service attack or do website defacements. But talking specifically about ransomware here in Texas, not everyone might be as up to speed as myself and my fellow panelists on threat intelligence, but there's some more threat actor groups that have been around longer, like QOP and Conti, but recently we've been seeing Royal and Lockbit attack entities here in Texas. And when I say entities, it could be state agencies and or cities, counties, school districts, things of that nature. And you can read about this, but the thing to note is what we're seeing recently is, so in addition to them encrypting your systems and getting you to pay the ransom, that's a form of extortion, they're also doing double and triple extortion, and I'll explain that a little bit. So the double, and they kind of have different tactics because they're different groups, some based more out of Russia or Ukraine, but so the double extortion would be that they say, hey, we have your data and we're going to post it. So if you don't pay the ransom, because they're enticing you to pay it because your system's encrypted, then they threaten that they have data exfiltration. And so Royal, for example, will wait a long time. They will say, we have your data, we're going to post it, and they'll wait a long time to see if they can get the ransom out of you. Lockbit will typically go right out and show a sample of your data, but they won't show it all. And so that's the double extortion. And then the triple extortion comes through where they'll also come back later and do what's known as a denial of service attack, where they flood your network, they make your services unavailable. And we've also seen where, for example, they'll go after your customers, and they might have their information and say, hey, try and get something to get your customers to influence you to pay the ransom. So those are some kind of newer tactics we're seeing here in Texas.
George, go ahead if you have any comments.
I just wanted to chime in as well. Ransomware is a very, very, concern that's in the back of everybody's mind. So we do have specialized capabilities specifically for ransomware. We actually have a ransomware readiness assessment. Really short and sweet, takes about 30, 40 minutes to really at a fundamental level, are we doing our due diligence when it comes to dealing with, preparing for the threat of ransomware. Also at CISA, we've also have started a pilot program called the Ransomware Vulnerability Warning Program. So this is where we're monitoring a lot of threat actors, Lockbit, Royal, that are out there. So we tend to see a lot of activity, which also leads to organizations that have been compromised, or we call pre-ransomware activity. So there's a lot of efforts that we can do to actually notify. So it's easier if you guys are part of the program. That way we could do a straight beeline to you. Otherwise, as you recalled in your conversation, we call you in the middle of the night and trying to convince you that we are the federal government. That can be really, really kind of a tough hurdle to convince you that this is a legitimate call. But we're trying to warn you that we've detected what we call pre-ransomware activity. Let me kind of explain that a little bit. What is pre-ransomware activity? So typically it's not you click and you're ransom. Okay, what can also happen is you click and there's things going on in your environment. We call reconnaissance. They're trying to see can they move laterally. There's really not much of an impact to ransomware one system when they can ransomware the entire network, to actually move over to see if you have backups on your network. So this is what we call pre-ransomware activity. Nothing's detonated. They're in your network. They're sort of kind of getting a lay of the land. Who are you? What price point can we actually, it'd be unfathomable, unrealistic to say, I want 20 billion for a small organization. It's not going to happen, okay? So they're trying to do a recon, figure out who you are, to really come with a reasonable price point to, provide that ransom. So this ransomware vulnerability warning program is something that we are doing so that once you're a part of the program, it's a lot easier for us to just immediately notify you. Otherwise, we're spending days and hours trying to cold call you, which is not fun.
Right.
Anyway,
Thank you,
Thank you.
George. Stephen, as a small business, what should we be asking someone like you, your business, if we're concerned about cybersecurity? I mean, certainly I don't have a clue what to ask about what we need to do and how do we protect our system. So what should we ask?
Sure. I mean, a lot of having a vendor in IT, a lot of it comes down to trust, because in the end, if you knew everything about IT, you'd be less likely to outsource it to somebody. So bottom line is you're having to trust somebody that can give you good information. So the first and foremost, you need to, if you trust them enough to get the job done, you need to just ask them, let's have a conversation about cybersecurity. Where are my vulnerabilities? What can I do about those? Have that conversation and have the faith that they're going to give you good, solid answers about what needs to be done, where the investments need to be made, and then actually follow through and make those investments. Unfortunately, very few of them are free. There are a handful of good tasks, good steps that you can do, multi-factor authentication, a few things like that that are either very affordable or free, but there's quite a few of them that actually cost some money. Nothing should break the bank, by the way, but it certainly requires an investment. But you have that conversation. And if you don't have faith during this conversation, if you don't feel like you got a solid evaluation, trust your gut. Get a second opinion. Talk to somebody else. There's been plenty of times where we're brought in just simply as and we're told in advance, look, we have an IT company, we're happy with them. I want a second opinion, though, to tell me where our vulnerabilities are. There's nothing wrong with that. And it might make the incumbent a little nervous, but that's the way it goes. You have that, you work through that, you get the assessment, you say, here's some vulnerabilities, and you decide if that lines up with what the other person was promising. And we're always happy to do it, because if they're not giving good advice, it might be a new customer for us. So, but if they're giving good advice, we're pleased to tell them that as well. So, but it is critical to do that, and it is critical to invest in it. Nowadays, if you guys haven't run into it already, cybersecurity insurance, those of you that have carried that in the past, if you're not, please consider carrying it. Every single company is vulnerable. When you see companies like the Home Depots, the Marriotts, all these massive companies that spend tens of millions of dollars on cybersecurity, and they get hit successfully, trust me, everybody is vulnerable. There's nothing that can protect you 100%. So consider your cybersecurity insurance. And with that, nowadays, starting about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, the requirements for getting cybersecurity insurance have been stepped up tremendously. We now have to fill out, before it was a checkbox, now it's a 6 to 10 page form answering questions about how you're protecting your office, what steps you're taking. And if you're not taking the right steps, you will not get approved, bottom line, or the premium will get so expensive it'd be cheaper to go ahead and get ransomware. So, bottom line is, yeah, again, have that conversation. Be completely comfortable and prepared and upfront about getting a second opinion if you don't think you got the right answers the first time.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So, Jeremy, you've certainly outlined, and in fact, all of you have, but give us some areas that the state of Texas is doing to protect our businesses in cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about some free things, of course. Also, agree with some of the recommendations you made, looking at insurance and some other things. And I would say what, George was sharing about CISA, at the state level, we get information from that hunt team, and pre-ransomware activities, it's very close, upper 99% of the alerts that we get from them, where we go call a city, county, school district, or somebody in Texas, and they are able to take action before they're encrypted. So as he said, it's much easier to start the partnership now. So take advantage of the federal resources that he mentioned. At the state level, we have some free things I wanted to mention. We have the Texas Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, DIR. We have a booth back here. They can get you info on that. That is a public-private partnership. It is absolutely free to join. Mm-hmm. So when I mentioned we're seeing this kind of stuff, recently with Royal and Lockbit and other ransomware groups, we send that out to all the members. There's over 2,000 members. Every one of you guys can join for free. So if we get threat intelligence from the federal or from the vendor community, or things that we're seeing, working incidents here in Texas, we're going to share it that way, and that's a free resource. And also, if your organization sees something kind of like fishy, hey, I clicked on something that doesn't look right, you can report it. That helps other members in the community. So that's a free initiative. And then I just want to talk about, You know, the regular session of the legislature just wrapped up. We've had a lot of really great support over the years from our Texas legislature. The previous session authorized Senate Bill 475, and that gave us the authority to create the Regional Security Operations Center pilot project at Angelo State University. We're going to be expanding to UT Austin and UT Rio Grande Valley, and then hopefully across the other sessions we'll have a center at everywhere in Texas. And so this is a partnership with Texas Public Universities where students get to go and get trained on how to do security operations, because there's negative employment cybersecurity, and they're giving free security services to cities, counties, and school districts in your community. So that'll improve security right there. And then we also have the volunteer incident response team. So if there's anybody to be interested in kind of supporting the state when somebody's hit, it's kind of like a volunteer firefighter model. We have information on that. There is a background check process, but that's something that we have. We have over 100 members now. So if the governor declares a disaster for cybersecurity, which is what happened in August 2019 when we had 23 local governments hit by ransomware, then we can call our VERT members and say, hey, can you go? Can you help out? And so that's another pretty neat initiative. And then we also got the authority to create our cybersecurity incident response team. So those are 10 individuals that kind of work under me, and when there's cybersecurity incidents and ransomware across the state, we can also help them for free.
Very good. George, you know, you're getting access to a lot of confidential information with clients, businesses, et cetera, and whether it's customer base or client base and all of their pertinent personal information. Do you work with NDAs? How do you protect the security of the data you're working with?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So first of all, CISA is not an intelligence agency. We're not. Okay, so we work with intelligence agencies, but we're not a part of the intelligence community. Now, secondly, in order to actually for us to work with our organizations, our stakeholders, our partners, you know, we actually have to, you know, it's like a doctor. We need to know what's wrong in order to sort of kind of devise a treatment. Okay, it's the same approach. So the way we go about protecting your information is back in 2012-ish, Congress initiated the PCII program, the Protected Critical Infrastructure Information Act. So this is an act in which, by law, we have to protect your information. So whenever we're doing assessments, we're putting up together some reports, things like that for you, that's strictly for your eyes. Now, there's things that we do as far as trying to look for trends to see is there like a pattern that we need to sort of get ahead of. But for the most part, we are, by law, are not allowed to share, disclose with regulators, the state, you know, if there's a lawsuit, a litigation, if there's a FOIA request, just going to give you an example. So we are fiscally and criminally liable for any disclosure. So we take it serious. So, but again, you know, it's really impossible to help you without us actually understanding what the problems are. Okay, so that's one of the efforts that we do. So no NDAs, we don't do NDAs, but we do provide the Protected Critical Infrastructure Information forms, which basically you're requesting protection status. And once that's signed and we give you a little, like a ticket number, from that point on, your reports are held confidential. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, George. We have about 5 minutes left, so I have a question that, and y'all don't even know what I'm going to ask, but it's top of mind right now, and that's artificial intelligence. AI is everywhere. We have to get used to it. Perhaps we have to control it. I just read where the European group is already trying to put legislation into to change that and control it. Chatbots are everywhere, but ChatGPT is another one that is out there. How do you feel about the security of chatbots and artificial intelligence at the moment? And please, any one of you.
Yeah. I'll just say, you know, you talked about you got that phishing email or maybe you clicked on something. So people that maybe, you know, it would have been a little harder for them to perpetrate attack or automated attack, they can now use those services to either on the front end, you know, send more well-crafted emails that look, you know, they can feed information about your organization, so it helps them that way. And then as far as like coding and automating the attack, it's really, I think it's definitely a threat. To your point, you know, there's going to be some regulation around it, right? At some point, right now, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So
It is.
it's a real concern, you know.
Yeah, I'll just say, for me, I look at it, almost every technology, probably every technology that's ever been invented is kind of a double-edged sword, right? It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. So I'm not one of these guys that says we should just ban it altogether and stop development on it. I don't think that's a practical solution, but there's no doubt that it represents a threat as much as an opportunity. And it needs to be watched. I know just recently there was a big news article about it created a really powerful, somebody used it to create a very powerful ransomware. I forget the name of it. I don't know if you remember it, but they proved that it was one of the more effective ransomware packages that had ever been created that they've tracked. And they did it almost entirely through an AI engine, so without the protections built onto it. So there's no doubt it can be used for threat purposes. How we resolve that is, you know, hopefully we can do that with a combination of technology and legislation to try and do it. But in the end, you know, everything can be used for good or evil. It's just a matter of how it's used. So
Yeah, we had an incident recently, I'm sure you read, where it was a fictional bombing of the Pentagon. It looked so realistic
Yes.
that it affected Wall Street and how they opened that morning. So financially, it could destroy us in a matter of minutes. So
Right.
it's very frightening right now how real it can be or seem.
Sure.
Go ahead,
I can
George.
chime in a little bit. So this is not necessarily an official, but just kind of me, it's really out of my lane, not, you know, something that I kind of deal with, but just at a practical level, just with the whole sophistication to do attacks nowadays, I think it's going to be an issue where we're really going to have to get better prepared, because right now it's to a point to where even exploiting vulnerabilities is not a difficult task. It's almost you just point, click, launch. It'll basically launch a specific exploit to the specific vulnerability that was detected. So a lot of more automated attacks, I kind of feel it's going to be more prevalent, but as well as also the concerns about misinformation, the whole fake accounts, that type of thing. So again, these are going to be concerns that I think is just going to get worse over time, unless we sort of kind of get our hands around it.
Thank you, George. And again, thanks to this panel of experts. I thought maybe we have like 5 minutes left. I don't know, do we have the opportunity to ask questions? I'm looking for Brian.
yes.
So let's open it up, if you don't mind, Brian, to anything that take advantage of these experts. And I love free, and so they're here. We have a question over here on the far right.
He's going to get some steps.
Right over there.
There's a microphone coming.
Yes, so I'm a starting entrepreneur. I just started last year, and of course, I do have a website, a domain, realvarietyradio.com. And actually, before I got started, I was defaced. I'm pretty sure I was DDoSed, or whatever you call it, a denial of service. But my site did get defaced. So with that being said, I wonder if you could recommend like an affordable IT company that I can work with, who can not only optimize my website, but to make sure that it's secure. And also, I've been using ChatGPT to write my social media posts for my events. Would y'all say that that's safe?
Well, I can certainly recommend a good IT company for you. So yes, I have my business card, so we'll be happy to talk afterwards. As far as ChatGPT and using it as a tool, yes, I believe it's safe. It's all about the motivation. I mean, you know, bad people are going to use things for bad purposes, and good people are going to use it for good purposes. So I don't think there's anything problem using it as a tool. But there's also a threat side to it that we have to know about and we have to be aware of as a society.
And if whoever's talking, if you could come to my table later, we could exchange contact.
Certainly,
Yes, we can
be
do
happy
that.
to.
Yeah.
Stephen Wright.
And, okay, over here in the right side again.
Just while he's walking over there, kind of following up on that, sometimes it's not till your website's defaced or something like that that you realize maybe you don't have all the things in place, and that's a great time to evaluate. And you know, so ahead of time, just kind of following up on that, looking at the contracts you have in place, looking at the monitoring and the solutions. I know you mentioned multi-factor authentication. If you're worried about ransomware, offline backups and testing them. He talked about vulnerabilities, so patching. So there's a bunch of free things that are like a time investment to evaluate your contracts, your services, or make sure you're patching, or make sure you have backups, or you've implemented MFA as widely as possible. And if you do those things, you're probably going to be safe. Like, there's no silver bullet, but I just thought I'd mention that. Right.
One more question.
Yes, thank you. I'll keep this short. We have a big concern at our company that we're getting attacked daily by emails and spam and all those. I'm not sure if this was already covered or not. As well as on our business phones, just spam phone calls, and it's just really eating up a lot of our time and placing a lot of concerns on our company as to whether we're going to have a problem with some email that we open up. So my question is there anything being done at the state and or federal level to address this, where they're going after the people who are originating these spam?
Yeah, I really can't speak about what's actually. So CISA is non-law enforcement. So there's threat response or asset response. Those are the federal roles. Asset response is FBI. So that's more law enforcement. But as far as CISA, we're strictly asset response. It's just kind of help harden, layer defense, really going over best practices. But yeah, so I'm not the right person to ask about the repercussions or the type of repercussions against the threat actors actually doing those types of activities.
I'll just, I mentioned that in 2019, the governor declared a disaster for cybersecurity, and there were 23 local governments that were down for ransomware. Sometimes it takes years for the FBI or other federal entities to actually catch these people. But they, years later, the Dallas office was able to convict some of the people that perpetrated that. So whenever we work on cybersecurity incidents or have threat intel, we share it with our federal partners. And if a lot of times they're overseas, so it takes them maybe moving to an extradition country or something to that effect to actually get the bad guys. But if it's something here locally, DPS has the SciTech unit. I mentioned some of the other federal entities. There is a lot of efforts to prosecute. It's just that it can be years before you see those results, the fruit of those labors. So, yeah.
And there are laws. I can't vouch for how well they're enforced, but the Canned Spam Act is one, and I mean the people that are doing this are violating the law. I can't vouch for how often they're enforced and chased down, so to speak, but they definitely are laws against it.
And just back to that information sharing and analysis portal that I talked about, if you report it, we can, at least we're aware that there's a campaign going on in Texas, and we kind of share that out across the community so everyone can be aware and block it. And they'll typically come back and say, oh yes, this is something where they'll give you some feedback. So I just wanted to mention that again.
And I'd like to add, I will tell you that as the only private company up here, I put myself in your shoes, and if I was in the audience right now, I'd be hearing this, and I'd be very skeptical about talking with the government agencies, and are they really going to follow through and do this? I can tell you I've had some personal experience just in the last month with CISA, or CISA, I think is how I'm supposed to say that. And they were fantastic. They did exactly what they just described. They contacted somebody that I had been trying to win as a customer and said, this is a much longer story that I don't have time for, but the short version is they contacted a prospect that I had been talking to on a Saturday, no less, told them that their network was being attacked, and that person then called me and said, can I be your customer today? I'm in trouble. And sure, my initial reaction was, yes, but that guy from CIS is the bad guy. Don't call him back. And again, short version, it proved out to be totally true. It was legitimately that person. He was extremely helpful, and it was one of the most positive experiences I've had with a government agency in a long time. So I got to vouch for what they were doing right now.
Any other questions? We still have a few minutes left, actually. Nothing else?
Well, if nothing else, thank you very much. Let's give a big hand for this panel.